tonight. I've been wanting to do this program for a very long time, and so I thought it would be fun at the end of the semester to get together and do something just a little bit different. And I'm going to start off this evening by telling the tragic story of the death of Bun Bun. These are all stories from my life as an organist. And before I'm allowed to start, though, my little sister, who is an attorney, is making me read this. So I'm reading this. Due to the legal counsel of my attorney, the advice of my wife, and my own good common sense, of which my wife thinks there is none, the following disclaimer: all statements, both written and spoken in this program, are made in good faith and are intended to be a reasonable interpretation of the events that took place. The statements are not intended to cause harm to any person, company, entity, organization, religion, ethnicity, or any other similar type of group or association. The statements are also not intended to cause harm to any animal other than the harm that was caused to the bunny involved in the story. So, the worst decision that we ever made was to move into the parsonage next door to the church where I worked. I had received the church job in the normal way, and those of you who don't know what that means, I was the organist and assistant music director, and the music director had an affair with the previous accompanist in the church. And he got fired, and I was made the music director. I've gotten a couple jobs this way. Both of the men that I've followed in this case had the foresight, and I don't know what you would say, but they did the deed in the church building itself, amazingly enough, which is kind of fun because if you ever hang around Pentecostals, there's all these accompanying rituals that have to go on. They have to anoint the room with oil and pray over it and stuff. But in this case, this was just a sort of normal Methodist church. So an old church lady with some Lysol here, and everything that was necessary for the room where everything went on. And he was living in the parsonage at the time, the old parsonage of the church, which was right next door. And it was nicer than our house, so when he got fired, he moved out and he said, well, this is nicer than our house, it'll be great. I'm only going to live like 50 feet from where I work, and I'll just walk out my back door and go to work, and it'll be fantastic. And I didn't realize that living next door to work would mean that work would also live next door to me. You know, so people would just walk through the back fence whenever they felt like it and knock on my door to talk to me and all of that. And so I was the music director working there for a few years. And another strange thing about this church was that the choir had a formal structure in it. It had the choir had a president and a vice president and a secretary. And I don't know what they did, but they had that. The choir president was a woman who we're going to call, for the purposes of this story, Jill. And she came to me one day and she said, do you want a rabbit? And I thought, no, And she said, oh, it'll be good because you've got those two young boys and it'll teach them responsibility, and rabbits aren't really very hard to take care of or anything like that. And then she said, no. And I got home from work at some point, we're eating dinner, and Jennifer looks at me and says, do you want to get a rabbit? And I said, oh, Jill got to you, didn't she? And she said, you know, it'll be good because it'll teach the boys responsibility. And the rabbits are very easy to take care of. And she said, and also rabbits, we have a guinea pig, and rabbits and guinea pigs are cousins, and they'll get along. And I said, no, and she said, yes, and I said, no, and she said, yes, and so we compromised and got a rabbit. Some of you that aren't married yet don't know the definition of compromise, but you'll learn it. And I have, I brought with me, it's like journal entries from the first weeks when Bun Bun came into our house. So I brought these because I wanted to read them. Week 1. Bun Bun is loved and adored by all. She freely scampers about the living room, leaving little droppings on the floor. Oh, look how cute. It has tiny little poos. Let's clean it up and watch her go again, sweet little Bun Bun. I get to clean out the cage today. Zachariah has taken to calling the rabbit Hopper. I do not approve. If I were naming the animal after something it did, I would call it Pooper. Look, Hopper, Zach says, treats from the pet store. I am amazed at the responsibility that the boys are learning. Week 2, Bun Bun is loved and adored by all. She stays in the cage next to the television only slightly more often. 3 times during the week, she's allowed to bounce around the living room and leave her fecal pellet trail. The boys follow her using their toy bulldozers as pooper scoopers. There is less arguing over whose day it is to clean the cage. Week 3, Bun Bun spends the entire week in the cage. She doesn't participate in any parades. When she is finally released, the cleanup crew is nowhere to be found. Week 4, Bun Bun lives in the cage all of the time. The joy of cleaning her excrement from the floor has somehow lost its luster. The cage has not been cleaned unless the children are forced to do it. I begin to see sorrow in the rabbit's eye when I walk past the cage. Bun Bun has started to communicate with me telepathically. Courage, she says, let me out of the cage, let me poop on your floor. Remember how happy I was jumping and skipping and pooing? Why did you take that away from me? I'm an animal from the woods. Woodland creatures they like to go to the bathroom in lots of different places. I don't like to pick a favorite toilet for my bowel movements, and you made me go in this cage all week. I need to go in different spots. Kurt, you knew they would lose interest in me, but you still agreed. Should I have to suffer because of them? Help me, Kurt. Look into my adorable eyes. Please, please let me poo all over your floor. Week 5. The cage is starting to smell. When it's my turn to feed the rabbit, I have a routine where I lift the lid of the cage and pour the food in the water without making eye contact. Bun Bun is still communicating with me telepathically. I begin progressing through the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. Denial. I walk into the other room pretending that I didn't hear Bun Bun talking to me. Anger. Look, I say, I didn't want you in the first place. It's not my fault that you're in this situation. Quit talking to me and talk to Jennifer and the boys. Bargaining. If I take you out of the cage, will you promise not to do anything that would risk our relationship? I feel that we are in a cooling off period right now, and physical contact would only damage something that's hanging on by a thread. Depression. Why does this always happen to me? I should say no. Wait, I did say no. I didn't really say it though, I compromised. I have to walk around feeling guilty because I was the only one who knew what would happen, and I didn't stop it. Acceptance. Bun Bun? Yes. I've come to terms with the fact that I'm not a rabbit cage cleaner. Yes? If you're going to live here, you will have to live here with someone who does not care for you like he should. Doesn't mean that I don't love you, and I'm sorry that I can't treat you in the way that you deserve. I'm sorry that you can't live like your forest friends and poo wherever you want. But I have needs too, and right now at this point in my life, I have a need not to have little pellets of poo all over my phone. The only way that I see that happening is if you stay in the cage. And her tears begin to flow, and I say, do you still want to stay? And she answers yes. And I say, even though you know what that means? And she says, yes again. So, the rabbit is living next to the cage, and living next to the guinea pig by the TV set, and the cage is getting cleaned up. In the meanwhile, a group of the trustees committee from the church, I don't know if they got a report or something, but somehow they got it into their head that perhaps their music director's lifestyle was a little more bohemian than they may have anticipated when they rented him the parsonage next door to the church. So they formed a committee to come over and inspect our house to make sure that we were keeping it in a manner that befit a United Methodist or whatever, right? So So, and they called this little subcommittee group the House Nazis. Really, they didn't call it that, but that's what we call them. So they set this date of a Monday night that they were going to come over and inspect the house to make sure that it was being kept. So we did what anybody would do in that situation. We waited till Friday night before the Monday that they were coming over to inspect, and went out and got some beer and started drinking beer, cleaning, drinking beer, scrubbing, pulling up carpets and scrubbing baseboards, and in the middle of all of that, I'm like, what do you want to do with that rabbit? Oh, let's just take it out. We'll set the cage in the backyard, deal with it after the inspection is done. So I take the cage out in the backyard. Day of the inspection, it's the Monday, it arrives, I'm sitting there, it's during the daytime, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the back door, and someone has just let themselves through the back fence, and it's Jill, the choir president, and she wants something or other. I don't know what she wants, I take care of it. She leaves. Monday night, the inspection comes, they look through the house, they say, oh, it's very clean, very good, you need to clean out your garage, which was a terrible thing to say to us, because the garage was full of all the stuff from the church that they didn't have places to put. There were like 90 folding chairs and a 12-foot wooden cross. So that's fine. House Nazis go, everybody's happy. Tuesday morning, get up, I'm all excited, Jen goes to work, get the boys off to school, I'm walking my 50 feet to work, all happy again, and I'm walking out the back pathway, and I look over at Bun Bun's cage where it is, and I can see that something's like not quite right, and so I like take a few steps over to get closer to the cage, and this rabbit is dead, and it looks like a cartoon. I mean, it's like 4 legs sticking straight up from the air. Rigor mortis has set in. There's like one eyeball pressed against the side of the cage and a fly that's flying around. And I was like, whoa, I gotta take care of that before the boys get home. And then I thought, no, you know what I'm gonna do? I'll go to church and I'll practice for like 2 hours. And then I'll come home and eat some lunch and put the rabbit in a box, and we'll have a burial ceremony for it later on. So I walk over to the church, and this is like 20 seconds after I've just seen this dead rabbit. And I open the door of the church, and who is waiting for me but Jill, who says, oh, Kurt, I was waiting for you. I couldn't help but notice when I walked through your backyard yesterday that little Bun Bun's cage hadn't been cleaned out for a while, so I took the liberty of going to the pet store and buying some new bedding and some treats. So I wondered very much if you would mind if I go into the backyard and clean out her cage and spend some time with her and give her some treats. Before you judge me too harshly, I want to remind you of 2 things. Number 1, I didn't want the rabbit to begin with. And number 2, I had already gone through the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, so my emotional attachment to the rabbit was gone. So not thinking anything of it, I just said, Sally, the rabbit's dead. And I walked into the church and started practicing the harvest. And so next day, choir practice happens. I'm sorry, Jill. She doesn't show up. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird, because she never misses. She's the president of the choir. And she was also working at the church at the time, kind of part-time, and the next day she's not at work either. And I run into the pastor's wife, who knows everything about what's going on in the church. And I say, where is she? And she says, oh, you don't know. She's missed work for 3 days. She can't work because she's so upset and grieving about this rabbit. And I said, oh, but the rabbit's dead? She's that upset that she's missed work for 3 days? And she said, yeah, she's really broken up about this. So Friday comes around, and she shows up, and she just walks up to me and says, we need to talk. And so she says, can you meet Sunday night? Yes, so I can meet with her Sunday night. So, I get ready for the Sunday night meeting, and I always feel like it's important when somebody's going to talk to you about their feelings about a rabbit dying that you need a strategy. You do. And so I didn't want to just go in blind, so I thought, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in with my best Christian charity, let her get out and say, I'm sorry, because in some cosmic sense, the universe is worse off because the rabbit's not with us anymore. So I go into the meeting and I sit down. I have to use Caitlin here for a minute to show you what this was like, because I wasn't completely prepared for what actually happened. So I sit down in a chair like Caitlin is here, and I'm waiting for her to like talk to me, and no, she comes running at me from the other side of the room, like running, and gets up like right in my face like this, and she's like, I mean, yelling at me at the top of her lungs for 45 minutes, like right here in my face. She's screaming at me about all the implications that this rabbit's death has for my life, about how I'm ruining my children, I'm a bad father, and that she's questioning my spiritual life, and all of this stuff, which is okay. Well, this is how she started anyway, because the problem if anyone's yelling at you like for that long, I start to lose concentration. You know what I mean? Because in my mind, I'm going, man, I start going, well, people look really strange when they're yelling. You take eye contact, you know, and then I'm like, oh, look at that little bit of drool that's coming. No, maintain eye contact. And worse too is because I'm a musician, you know, I start doing this issue, they're like, rah, 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 rah. And then I go like, oh, that's like almost a perfect fifth. Oh, that's a minor third. And then I started developing the system like, oh, that's almost a major seventh. That time she was being really, I tried to sort of get it to judge how angry she was, but I never know. And then finally, she ends her big tirade, and I say, you know, I'm sorry that the rabbit died, or whatever, and she says, so anyway, I've been collecting complaints about you from around the church this past week. Anything anyone's been upset with you about for the past 6 months, and I'm taking them to the personnel committee tomorrow night. And I was like, what is this? And then she walked out. So then I had to have a meeting the next day with a pastor and say, look, I mean, I understand that she can present complaints and stuff, but I don't feel like that any lack of ability I have in the area of like animal husbandry should come into my job description with the personnel committee. So he's like, absolutely, she's not going to she's not going to talk about the rabbit with the personnel committee. She's only going to talk about other stuff. So I got a phone call after the meeting from my liaison with the personnel committee, and I said, how did the meeting go? And he said, well, it ended with her telling the story about a rabbit dying. She told it in such a way that it caused many of the members of the personnel committee to start crying. And you know, at some point like this, that like I realized my job is going downhill all because this rabbit died. That you know, I look to my wife for comfort, who is always ready to like, you know, I can't believe that I'm in trouble at work because the rabbit's dying. And Jennifer would always be like, kill the rabbit. So the end of this, and I'm going to kind of go through the end of it pretty quick. Although what happened was they had a meeting, and then that same week, another person that she was working with wrote a letter that said that they were concerned about my spiritual life because I didn't smile very much. So the pastor came in and had a meeting with me about that too, and said, you really don't smile very much. And I said, I'm in trouble at work because a rabbit died. And you want me to smile about it all the time? And you know, it was kind of funny because he tried to push the point and he quoted some scripture verse or something, and I'm like, you're going to try to do that with me? You know, I said, Ecclesiastes says a sad face is good for the heart. I'm concerned about your spiritual life because you're not sad living enough. He wasn't going to get into a Bible quote off with me. So then my liaison with the personnel committee said, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go in and have this meeting, and I think the problem is, you know, you're working like 60 hours a week, and the church only thinks you're working for 30, so we just need a new job description for you, and I think we're going to push for a raise and everything. And I said, I understand now. I understand why Bun Bun had to die. Bun Bun had to die so that I could get a raise. And the universe all made sense again. so we got it in, they had that big meeting and they presented the case, and I got the call from the pastor the next day, and I'm all excited. And I said, how did the meeting go? And he said, well, something kind of unexpected happened, and you're going to continue at your same salary for the next 6 weeks, at which point the church won't require your services anymore. And I said, what? He said, yeah, so as of November 1st, we won't require your services anymore, so can you call your people and tell them? Because I had a staff, I had a staff of musicians that worked for me there. And so I started calling people, and I said, I got fired. And they're like, what? Why? I said, well, remember when I took that rabbit? So then I get a phone call from the pastor the next day who says, what are you telling people? Because I haven't been able to work all day. My office is flooded with calls. I'm having to meet with all of these people because they're all upset because they're saying that you're telling them that we fired you. And I said, you did fire me. I said, we want you to tell people that you resigned. And I said, oh, no, you don't get it both ways. So then they had another emergency personnel meeting, and they hired me back the next day. But it didn't, but they put me on an action plan, which is never a good sign. And eventually, within a few months, one of the guys on the committee that was really upset that the initial firing didn't stick, found a reason to dock my pay for something, and he got into a screaming match with Jennifer on the phone, so I turned in my resignation the next day and left. But fortunately for me, within a few, 2 weeks, I got a call from this pastor who said, hey, listen, we're interested in you coming over and being our music director. It's kind of an awkward situation, but our music director had an affair with and you might really find this hard to believe, but they actually did the deed in the building itself. I really believe it. So that's the tragic tale of the death of Bun Bun. The next piece I want to play for you